Awesome. So, hi, I'm from Google, and I'm here to talk about the PAIR Bungee Method, which was a 3-month program focusing on machine learning research and UX research collaborations. So here's the actual title of the paper. The first author actually had a baby this weekend, so she's not able to make it here, but I am the second author. The first author was a UX researcher. I'm coming from the machine learning side. So this is kind of a byproduct of the program that I'm going to talk about. Before this program, I had no UX experience, so this is like my final exam. So this session's on AI challenges, and really to understand what the challenges are, we want to look at kind of the circumstances. And so at a place like Google, deep learning really accelerated in the last few years. And so as certain products found the useful effectiveness of using machine learning, other products also wanted to adopt very quickly. And what this creates is really an alignment issue where there's various key players. You can imagine a company like Google with various different roles, and they may have different objectives and incentives to try to achieve personally, but also for their teams. And so an ML researcher will be looking probably to publish at primary ML conferences. UI designer, UX designer would want to provide measurable utility for its user. And so when we look at the machine learning side, we want to look at specifically the Project Magenta, where I'm coming from. So this project has existed for the past 3 years and really focuses on machine learning for creative expressivity. And of course, the primary pursuit is to advance the state of the art and have machine learning research publications at like NeurIPS or ICLR, ICML. But it also has a domain. So I think the true heart and passion of the group is to really push the boundaries and extend the human creative process. And so here's a team that is using machine learning as a tool to create generative models that enhance musical and artistic creation as an extension of human capabilities. And prior to that, the way to really engage with Project Magenta would be to to have a GitHub account and be able to use Magenta's open source code. However, what we find is if if one of your primary user groups are musicians and creatives, they may not have that same abilities, or at least be able to achieve them feasibly. And here are 2 examples. So Andrew Huang and Terrence Southern are 2 musicians that reached out to Magenta for collaboration. And in the case of Terrence Southern, she actually decided to go with another tool that was more of a WYSIWYG, much more accessible type of AI interface. And Andrew Huang, that collaboration actually worked out. You can find his YouTube video online using Magenta, but required quite a bit of technical support, which doesn't scale very well and was very time expensive on the research side. So the research scientists really facilitated the production of of the music that he was making. And so, making products is not something new to Google, of course. We've got many very talented expertise throughout the company that have worked on a variety of products. And as a result of this AI boom or machine learning boom, there was the People in AI Research Group that was created to kind of bridge and facilitate the two-way communication between those working on the core technology and those who understand how to create products with them. And so this PAIR group, you can find this online, is really focused on understandability in machine learning models, how these expressive tools or the tools augment and extend human capabilities in a human-centric kind of way, and that we're also promoting fairness all throughout the process. And so as you have these key players, these people who are at various stages of the product, from the research all the way to the user, this introduces this issue with alignment. And so the core team, the UX side, so I'm on the ML side, the core UX side were led by these 3 individuals, a UX researcher, a UX designer, and a UX engineer. In the 3-month period, they were to help in collaboration with this Magenta project, which is also a team of various research scientists and engineers, put together a compositional tool augmented by machine learning. And so more specifically, they were looking to implement to help in conjunction with the team implement 2 modules from the machine learning models, and then create opportunities to expand more in the future. And so when we think of tools, we think more of these kind of tools, things that are universally used by musicians. We don't think about tools like this for when we're thinking of engaging with musicians. I mean, there are some. There's amazing communities of musicians that perform music this way. But what we're really looking for, and really the outcome, the product of this project was Magenta Studio, which was how do we get to that next level? And so we combined the two groups, the UX side and the ML research side, to kind of oversee this in a 3-month period of time. And so this is the pair bungee method, a 3-month pilot program that basically unrolled in three phases, much like the MCU. For Avengers fans, and roughly they were a month each, but I wouldn't say exactly. And a lot of these things, as you know, with making charts, they come in parallel, so they don't fall into buckets quite so nicely. But if we were to start with the first method, the first phase 1, the preparation phase, the basic. One of the entry points for at least on the UX side was really getting a foothold on machine learning and understanding how the technology works and knowing their way around the basics. Then from there, so week 1, machine learning bootcamp. Week 2, then they engage in a design sprint with the team. And then I'll show kind of like the first month after that. So there's, on the columns, it's week 3 and week 4 and week 5. And then you can see each of there's kind of these functions that are happening in parallel as these are going. And then these are the last 2 months. And I'll kind of go into these with more detail. Ending with there's a graduation, of course, at the end that had presentations for both sides so that both sides can really learn from one another. And so first, we started with a 2-day design sprint so one of the first sprints was a 2-day design sprint with Magenta, with the people of the Magenta team. And so here you can see a lot of these machine learning researchers have never really engaged in a design sprint or really understood what the function of what the function of the design sprint was really trying to accomplish. And so it was I think it was just learning by doing for them, for a lot of us. And from there, we had 7 potential concepts for towards the 2 final Magenta Studio modules. And so also from that, here's kind of the 3 types of functionalities that we were looking at and experimenting or trying to design with. It's these 3 actions: extending musical compositions or a melody line, creating variations of a melody line in music, and also infilling, so being able to fill in the gaps. Like you would see in some of these you would black out certain images and the machine learning model will be able to generatively fill them in, similar for music. And these tied into research publications. So here are the models and the publications that they referenced in the machine learning model side. So the target audience for this Magenta Studio was primarily early adopters and creative technologists. So there's a preference for people who already know how to code. Secondarily are people with computer literacy, so people who are comfortable and always using computers. And then, of course, the future would be improvisers and those who just use acoustic instruments. It would be great to be able to also use machine learning to help with their creative process. And so this goes to in the second phase, once we have done a lot of the design sprinting and iteration around that, we develop the prototypes. And so this started with concept studies where the UX team dialed in. So we dialed in with different creative technologists, and we showed these 7 potential concepts in 3-frame storyboards. And we collected things like, why did these concepts resonate with them? What did they like? What drew them to a certain tool? And then we also did a trip to Cal Arts in LA. So 8 of us. I was on this team. You could see I had purple hair at the time. There I am. And we worked with 24 Cal Arts students who are studying musical composition and using technology. And we asked them basically, if you had the tool of your dreams, what would it be? And of course, a lot of it is also understanding what machine learning can or cannot do, which is an important part of the iteration process. And this is one of the ideas that one of the students came up with, was the ask the band. And so you could kind of, if you needed inspiration, you had these band personas that you could reference that were trained a certain way to respond. And so from those studies, we collected a few insights, and it's interesting how a lot of machine learning research is so deep in the technology. They never ask, one of the core users what they think, and we learned some interesting things from these creatives. So they want creative choice to remain with them, and that's not a surprise. But I think one thing is that the struggle is part of the process, so they actually enjoy the struggle, or not enjoy it, but like it's such an important part of it. You don't want to take that away. And then also this music work is just iterative. They don't want like a one-click solution. They want to be able to evolve it. And so we took those concepts from design to a actual prototype, and then built out the features that we thought were most relevant, or that from the synthesis of all the data appeared most relevant. And so that leads us to the third phase, and the end game. Just kidding. And so here we have the evaluation of these tools, or the prototypes. So it's kind of it's not exactly like, you do the evaluation in the third phase, but you actually do the evaluation all throughout. So every 2 weeks that they were continuously collecting feedback from users. And of course, with a cross-functional UX team, there's a lot you can do. And we really wanted, from these evaluations, we wanted to figure out, whether these components were actually in the right place. And so, like I said, initially there were these 3 functions that we were testing out, and we actually found that only 2 of them were useful, or at least resonated with the user base. And then from that, we can kind of look at what the end product and then what happened after the 3-month period. So this was all done within the 3-month period. So the first one is variations, and the idea is you're given a musical melody line. So this is represented in piano roll, and you select a section of that, and then from there, in the pink in the bottom left, you'll see that the model is able to generate variations to go in place of that. Now, for extensions, you'll also see this as continuation, is that you actually select beyond the melody line, and it generates what can auto-complete that phrase. This is a simple web version of what that tool continued, the extension ended up looking like. And then after the 3-month period, they actually partnered with Ableton and developed a plugin so that, and this is a tool that widely used by musicians. So having that functionality within a musical production tool like Ableton is a really accessible way for musicians to be able to use it. And so that went from this to that. But of course, like taking all these all the various research projects, but within these 3 functions, we had one that didn't get chosen for the 3-month Bungee, but you might have seen it in the machine learning Google Doodle, where they collected 20 million songs in 3 days. So a lot of the stuff, a lot of the fruits of the project kind of came out after the fact, and you can see that since then, if you go to g.co/magenta/studio, you can actually see online versions of the different modules that came out of it beyond the 2. And so to kind of wrap it up, we want to really showcase what were the main core aspects of this project that made it successful. And so I think first is the design sprint. And so if you're on the machine learning side, like myself, you don't have UX experience, and you don't really like this idea of how when we talk to users, it's usually to get feedback for research, and it's not like necessarily to design around what the user needs. And so this was new for most of the people on the machine learning side. And so really explaining that how that works was really important, but also it built a lot of rapport and relationships early on. The next was this idea of showing and telling, and not assuming that everything is obvious. So we did a lot of explaining what the different roles were. UX, it's not just one role. It's in this case there were 3, but there's various different functions and incentives that people have depending on what they're trying to do. And really understanding the calendar and timeline, I think, is always challenging, and especially if you're new to different various processes. If you're on the UX side, you may be new to the machine learning. If you're on the machine learning side, you're new to the UX process. So that communication and collaboration was very important. Investing in user research, and this is just a practice that was not something that it's not something that necessarily contributes to the machine learning publication, but if you're really trying to impact your core user community, you do need to talk to them. And that was something that you could kind of imagine, surveying a community of developers or a community of creatives, but having the process laid out that this is already something figured out was really helpful. And of course, like if you don't do that, everyone just ends up promoting the groupthink that they're comfortable with. And the fourth thing is discussing model specifics and really trying to make sure that the teams understand each other. And I think that worked out when the UX team would present design sketches early to show where they were at in terms of understanding what machine learning does or does not do. I know that oftentimes people think, it's this very magical thing and it just kind of happens. But I think that really is that's the burden of the machine learning researcher to be able to explain and figure out whether what they've communicated was actually understandable or meaningful. So these are the four primary core concepts from the Bungee program. And the last, I'll just end with 3 takeaways from this project overall. The ending, what happened as a result. In addition to the development of these cool projects, we also were able to engage with compliance and best practice, product compliance and best practices. We worked with them to figure out how to really understand engagement and tool use, and then out of this program, 7 ML model expansions came out with 9 new technical capabilities. The Magenta community grew as a result, of course, and of course our understanding of them also grew. So there's a mailing list for which you're all welcome to join, and hand-recruited 250 plus digital music composers, surveyed the Magenta mailing list to really understand where they were at with the project, which thus far has just been a GitHub repo, and then developed and they kind of boiled down 4 lightweight personas to really help understand the community better. But I think the best and the closing interaction was that in towards the end of the program, there was this design thinking type project of understanding where Magenta was going and what they should start, and the concept that got the most votes was there should be a partnership with UX community, as humans and users are a big piece of our mission, and we should have UX in Brain, which is the Google Brain, which is where Magenta is from. And I think really the conclusion is that there's nothing that replaces the trust and collaboration that comes with working together. So thank you very much, and I hope you found it useful to learn about the pair bungee method.
All right, we have some time for questions, and it would be great if folks could use the microphone, which I have one of in my hand. I'll start over here.
Hi, Chen, Spotify. So this is really great work. It's really exciting to see. And so I think in this case study, it looks like UX research is kind of a service to some of the machine learning science. And I'm wondering if you've thought about any ways to have sort of the user research or the human-computer interaction side is also like a partner and more sort of like, I guess maybe the research focus as well?
Yeah, so that was one of the, I think that identifying the challenges, it was that they're siloed, like research is sometimes a bit far from the product itself. And so one thing that was discovered was that they had to go back and on the machine learning side, we had to go back and rework some of the models because we didn't have those insights. And then we ended up building one of the things that wasn't even useful for the project itself because we didn't have that insight earlier on enough. And I know, I go back to this as that, we should actually be in partnership. This is actually, for me, the most meaningful takeaway was that these two groups got to learn from each other, but that this might not have otherwise happened if we didn't have this program there. And so the fact that the machine learning group was we need to partner with the UX community as early on. In the paper, it does mention that was one of the things that was the major takeaway.
Thank you very much. Great talk, especially nice to hear a talk like that from a designer's perspective. What I wanted to ask is that you mentioned some of the engagements that were crucial for the what about the other side? What have you failed at, and what would you do differently if you would to do such a project again?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the, I think that the planning that went into this was pretty thorough. I do think that there was, like I said earlier, a lot of the tools had been developed because there was not this collaboration set up ahead of time. So there was a lot of going back and redoing things. There was also not miscommunication, but like I was saying in some of these slides, that it wasn't necessarily clear what machine learning could or could not do, and I think that burden is on the machine learning researchers for not explaining it, or not having a good way to kind of convey that to people who are not knee deep in this stuff all the time. And so I think that is something that that commonly occurred. It definitely occurs on the user side when you ask a user, like, how would you use AI with your composition process? They don't necessarily have the strongest understanding of what that means.
All right.